guests here today. I started off working in this field in 1995. In 2002, I set up my company. My challenges haven't changed. My challenges are exactly where they were. People look at me as a charity, as a non-profit. People look at me as, हाँ कर देंगे, we'll do it for that person. Oh, he's visually impaired. Can I help him a little? I want to change the conversation today. As I'm sure all of you in this room want to. You want to change the conversation from people just talking about us as it's time to give, rather than us as we're an audience, we deserve to be listened to, we deserve to be serviced, we deserve to be included, and we are here, and we are a part of our population which has been ignored, has not been given opportunity, right? And to address some of these issues, and actually I'm not sure I want this entire panel to even, so I'd like this entire panel to think out of the box on what they think we should do in India to try to build the case for inclusion. So the topic for today is mainstreaming accessibility. The case for inclusion. How do we mainstream accessibility so that it's not an afterthought? How do we mainstream accessibility? So every education institute, or maybe one in every 3 computer classes, has accessibility needs and can address the needs of our population. How do we mainstream the conversation in education? How do we mainstream the conversation from the people with disabilities wanting inclusion? And how do we mainstream the conversation from government? So I'm going to start with George, who has been a dear friend, and everybody knows of him from SCORE Foundation. The first time I met George, it was about cricket for the blind. Am I right, George? Yeah? Yes. And it was something I got excited with, but it was not technology, because that was my calling. And now I have George here, hopefully trying to give his perspective on what he believes can help us build the case for inclusion. George, can we start with you?
Hello, yeah. I think it's time to say good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, India. Good. Right, so I'm not here to kind of list out what is not happening in our country, because I don't think cribbing and complaining really is my style. But what I'd like to do today is to share some of the experiences that I've had and kind of highlight or flag, as they say, certain pointers which, to my mind, either you can look at it which way, it depends on which way you look at it. It'll either hinder inclusion or mainstreaming, or it could accelerate mainstreaming. About a year ago, I had the privilege of visiting one of the states of India, and I was invited to attend a meeting with the Chief Secretary of the state. And when I walked in with my colleague, in the introduction, we had on the phone itself, I had mentioned that both of us who are going to come to see you are visually impaired. And he started off very, very ebulliently, but when he knew that we were visually impaired, he had a pathos in his voice. So as soon as we walked into his office, he grabbed both of us by the hands. Short of dragging us, took us to a chair. We sat down. And we started our conversation with pleasantries. And I opened my laptop, switched it on, and got into Microsoft Word to actually begin taking notes. When he suddenly stopped me and he says, Mr. Abraham, I thought you were blind. The Chief Secretary of a state was surprised that a blind person was using a computer. The point to be noted here is that a man in charge of executing, implementing policy for a state was not really aware. And I think Mr. Rob from Microsoft had mentioned that there's awareness as an issue which is kind of everybody talks about it, but very few people do something about it. So it struck me then that people at the highest levels who actually talk policy, discuss policy, are not aware of what can be done, what is available, how things can be done. Point number one. Point number two. I was attending a steering committee of the 12th five-year plan, which was essentially dealing with socially vulnerable groups, disability, the elderly, and beggary were the three groups that this committee was dealing with. And the secretary of the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment started reading out the various plans, ideas, and so on. And right through his presentation, he was talking, we will be providing this, we will be providing that, there will be caretakers, there will be this, that, the other. At the end of it, I got the impression that George Abraham is a liability on this country because we have to be provided for. I'd like to take this opportunity to mention